Thank you for watching. My name's Glenn Morgan. This is We the Governed, and today we're going to be talking about a classic DOGE Washington story of Washington State, because we're going to be talking about 4 different stories of government fraud just recently that's come into the news or been exposed in various fraud reports. And I'd like to tell you these stories because I think each one of these illustrates a different aspect of how fraud is being committed in local government where you and I live. Now, before I get into this and get into these stories, I just want to remind you to hit the subscribe and like button down below if you haven't done so already. It doesn't cost you anything except for a couple seconds of your time. And I also want to encourage you, if you think this is a useful story, an entertaining story, or an educational one, feel free to share it with others who you think might enjoy these stories as well. So let's get back and hit that fraud button, and let's start finding out exactly what's going on with our tax dollars that we entrust to our government officials. Now, many of you who've watched my channel before, you know some of the stories about Dennis Houston here in Franklin County, who spent 22 years and spent some time in the federal prison for all that money that he stole from Franklin County. Some of you might even be aware of the current Washington State fraud record holder here, Cova Campbell, certainly the best fraudster with the best social media posts, currently in first place, who got away with stealing $7 million from a low-income housing project in Tacoma just a few years ago. She's still in prison. However, let's get into the fact that most of us realize that there are a lot bigger frauds than anything that I'm talking about in this story today. There's a lot of people in government that have done a lot more damage to our state, your tax dollars, and the credibility, whatever's left, of government. But we're not going to be telling those stories today. We're going to be mainly focused on some of these other stories that I just think are worth digesting and getting into. And the first example I'm going to go into, I've titled, I Know, Let's Stage a Fake Robbery. And this one here has been sponsored by the Mabton City Deputy Clerk and her boyfriend. It's an unusual one, to be honest with you. And if you don't know where the city of Mabton is, that's okay. I don't blame you, because it's not an easy one to find. You have to go all the way over to Yakima and the county of Yakima, and it's a little teeny town of about 2,000 people right next to the Yakima Indian Reservation. And this town has actually been in the middle of some controversy lately. And it really just started out, it probably didn't start out here, because usually these things start out as a culture of bad behavior. But if you read the Washington State Auditor's Fraud Investigation Report that came out just a few months ago here, Deputy Clerk Yolanda Morales was really the prime and focused person here who really made a name for herself in that city. And the news stories that came out at the time talked about how there'd been some problems with her at work, and that all the city employees who actually worked there, they believed that she was in on this scam from the beginning. But let's get into exactly what it was she thought would be a great time and a great effort to get a little bit more extra spending money in her pocket. Well, first of all, she, as the deputy clerk there, decided to, she had $22,641, of which $13,402 were actually in cash, to go and deposit for the city. And this happened July 17th of last year. So here she is. She's going out. She's going to go take it and deposit it for the city and take it to the bank. However, she claimed that somebody robbed her in the parking lot. But oddly enough, she decided to wait about 30 minutes, which was just enough time to help that person get away with the robbery, to call the actual police. And then the police decided to come in and actually review the surveillance video, discovering that it happened to be Morales' boyfriend, Benjamin Morano, who actually was driving the getaway car, which turned out to be his mom's vehicle, and it wasn't too hard to track him down. So just because they stage a robbery doesn't mean it's the smartest staging plan anybody's ever come up with. So Morales gets arrested, and Morano, though, ends up being the one who gets charged with the primary crime. And of course, everyone pleads not guilty, and everyone's just as innocent as you can imagine. However, the mayor of Mabton actually ended up being put up for a recall election not that long ago, and the Supreme Court just a few months ago decided that the people could go ahead and collect signatures for that recall effort, and it's leading to just a high level of drama in this town. And I do not think that this level of incompetence that was exposed by this employee deciding to stage a fake robbery to steal money really helped improve the community's perception of the high quality of their political leadership in that city. Now, here's my next example. And moving on to example number 2, it really isn't your money, it's actually mine. This is the attitude that many employees have that work for government, and it's unfortunate, but this particular one is actually sponsored by the Tumwater Parks and Rec Manager. It's always appreciative to identify who sponsors each of these stories. So if you don't know where Tumwater is, it is located right south of the city of Olympia, just south of our state capital. This is the county where I live, and Tumwater is pretty close to where I live as well. They do have a Park and Recs department, and according to the auditor report here, what triggered this investigation was actually some employees who worked in the Park and Recs department realizing that this Park and Recs manager was borrowing or basically taking city ramps for vehicles, presumably, and he was taking them and using them for his own purposes. They've taken them home, using them city resources for his personal purposes, and that basically was the activity, at least used as the excuse to finally dig in here and see exactly what's going on here at the Park and Recs department in Tumwater. I know it's easy to get confused with the show, but it's actually sillier than that. So what happened is they decided, let's look at the credit card expenses for this guy, and it turned out that he had stolen roughly $13,844 or $5,434. And the reason why I say it's or is that there were a variety of expenditures that were very clearly theft of money from the city of Tumwater, but there were also some they couldn't quite tell. Was it stolen or was it actually a legitimate use? Neither the state auditor's office nor Tumwater could really agree on exactly what qualified as that type of expense, and that's why I say it's an either or. However, he did admit some of this theft, and then what he was trying to do was to get the custodian in the Tumwater Parks and Rec department to come out and actually remove stuff from his property from his home that actually was Tumwater property, and the custodian refused to do it, but this was kind of part of the drama. The city ended up withholding $11,794 from his final paycheck, so at least I got that money back, and this has been referred to the Thurston County Prosecutor's Office just a few months ago. So that's a good example, and there's a little helpful tip in this whole thing. Many of you have seen and been to some of my DOGE training classes, and one of the things I always say is follow the money. And if you want to find where money is often misused in government places, you got to remember that our local governments, just like the federal and the state government, hand out credit cards like candy, and everybody's got one, and nobody seems to be looking at how they're used. And so they are widely issued, they're often abused. So if you want to start digging into expenses where you live, start with those credit card expenses, the detailed credit card receipts and expenses, and look at exactly what they are spending your taxpayer dollars are. Going on to example number 3, and this is the I want it all example. This one is actually sponsored by the town of Hatton, the clerk treasurer who works there, and basically decided to take it all. Now, if you don't know where the town of Hatton is, I don't blame you. It's out in Adams County here. It is such a small place on the map. There's about 200 people that live there. It's not an official city, but they do provide water and garbage services for the locals. And according to the state auditor's report here, and I have a picture, this is what downtown Hatton looks like. Center of the universe and the center of this example and the fraud that was committed there. Now, in this case, it was actually the town clerk treasurer there named Jared Potts who was arrested for theft from that town. What was kind of interesting about it is when you really look at the story, he stole $72,119 in just 2 years of effort, it looks like, and it looks like he probably misappropriated another $144,604. And I can't say that they could document absolutely that it was stolen because their financial controls were so bad that nobody could actually figure out exactly what was going on there. Especially this is amazing when you consider the town's annual budget's only $186,000. So it means during that 2-year period of time, the majority of money that existed in the budget of this town went into Jared Potts' pocket, is what it looks like. He was only caught actually after the mayor resigned, and then a volunteer from the community decided to try to help with finances and saw such a mess that he referred this over to the fraud investigation unit at the state auditor's office because up until then, nobody had been looking. Now, example number 4. This one is another classic case, and I think it's one that probably goes on more than anybody realizes. And I call this the I think I'll give myself a bonus today. And this one is specifically sponsored by the finance manager for the former finance manager for the Washington County's Insurance Fund, which is located in Thurston County. Their offices are actually over in Tumwater, just not that far away from the Parks and Recs manager that we talked about earlier in the show. Now, according to the fraud report right here that was issued by the Washington State Auditor's Office, and I'll link to all 4 of these fraud reports down below. You can, and some of the newspaper articles or news articles, if there are any, down below, if you want to read a little bit more about any one of these stories. But this was an interesting story because what you really had here is a brand new employee who was brought on originally. The former manager had retired or resigned or something. They had to bring in this new guy. They hired a temp agency, and then they made this person a permanent finance manager on January 1st, 2024, so just last year. And within 2 days, the guy started doing all kinds of weird things. His name was Anthony Matagi. He immediately started doing just strange things right out of the bat. It does appear that he decided to start stealing from the state the day he got that job, if it wasn't to plan even before he got there. In a very short period of time, Matagi actually managed to give himself an extra $123,000, which nobody actually noticed. And he was milking his job for all he was worth. The challenge I think that he had is he was also not very good at his job and screwing up in a lot of other ways. He has been referred to the Thurston County Prosecutor's Office, and they have charged him with fraud, and that case is ongoing. He has not yet been convicted, but when you read the report, it looks pretty likely that if this guy had been able to stay on, as most of these people are, and get away with this for many years, he could have been inching closer up to potentially getting into our top 5 fraudsters in Washington State. But he wasn't able to get that far, and right now he's dealing with the legal system, as weak and wimpy as it is when it comes to stealing money from government. Oftentimes, the challenge that we have, of course, is recognizing the people who work in government, not just the politicians that we elect or think that we elect, but the people who actually work in government. People oftentimes think that the problem is that even though they're working for government, they're really working for themselves, of course. And that is a problem. And it is a challenge in our modern bureaucracy, the bigger and more bloated that the bureaucracy gets. Of course, the sad part is that many of them have an attitude like, what do you think, that we're actually working for you, the people? There's nobody in bureaucracy that actually thinks they're working for you. They just think that they got to find a way to be able to take the most they can, and they want their fiefdoms protected from any kind of oversight, transparency, or exposure that they can get, which is why the narrative matters more than the truth. Or to quote Thomas Sowell, if the only way to understand government bureaucracy is to recognize that outcomes are completely unimportant and the only thing that matters is process. And in this case, unfortunately, the examples I've given you is that sometimes that process is used to personally enrich the people who actually work there. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to dress it up and make them look like they're better than they are. It's not just clowns that work in government. Unfortunately, we have a lot of crooks that work there too, as these recent stories, and trust me, there's a lot more where they came from. They just reveal the fact. And no matter whether you give them a suit and tie or put them in a fancy office, you still can't change the fact that bad things are being done there. And I don't know, but I almost guarantee you that the next person who's going to take that first place position away here from Cova Campbell and actually demonstrate when we catch them that you can steal a lot more than $7 million in a couple years working for government. We just haven't caught them yet. And many of these people, based on the nature of their crimes and the stupidity and incompetence they seem to reveal when they're committing them, I think we're mainly just catching the dumb, sloppy, and incompetent ones right now. But there's a lot more that you can find, especially if you're involved in the DOGE Washington training and the effort that we're putting out there to actually start paying attention and to look where nobody's really looking today. But of course, the real question is, what are you waiting for? This is a tremendous opportunity to come out and get involved and be engaged in government. If you are not engaged, not involved, don't presume that somebody else is actually doing the job for you. Nobody's coming to save you or I. Nobody's watching. Nobody's looking. And it just continues to go on the way that it is. But if you want to make some changes, engaging and being involved in these situations early. All but one of these cases, I believe, could have been revealed by just active citizens who are involved, paying attention and looking closely where exactly is the money going and how is it being spent in local government. If you want to understand that, always start with following the money first. But that can only happen as if you're willing to actually go and show up. Because, as I always say, the future belongs to those who show up.